I never imagined standing at the crossroads of love and betrayal, especially not on the day I was meant to marry the man of my dreams. But fate had other plans, weaving secrets and hidden agendas into the delicate lace of my wedding gown. My sister, once my closest confidant, secretly switched my meticulously crafted dress for a cheap, flimsy knockoff. I discovered the cruel trick just moments before walking down the aisle, heart pounding with shock and fury. Little did my sister know, she had ignited a spark of vengeance inside me, one that would lead to her ultimate humiliation. I grew up believing that my sister, Amelia, and I were destined to be inseparable. We were only 2 years apart, but the bond we shared felt timeless, like we'd known each other for centuries before we were ever born into this world. As girls, we hid under quilts in our grandmother's living room, giggling about fairy tale princes and magical kingdoms. We baked sugar cookies on sunny Saturday afternoons, each of us vying to be the first to lick the spoon. And when our parents fought behind closed doors, Amelia squeezed my hand, whispering reassurance that we were all each other needed. But as the years passed and our childhood innocence faded, subtle changes in Amelia's demeanor emerged. It started with petty comments about my clothes, or the way my hair curled. She mocked me about my awkward laughter, then dismissed me altogether when friends came over. At first, I brushed it off, attributing it to teenage hormones and a hunger for approval in high school's social hierarchy. Still, there were moments when I'd catch her glaring at me, her eyes filled with something I could only describe as fierce envy, or was it resentment? My parents didn't see it, or if they did, they believed it was normal sibling tension. My mother had grown up with 3 sisters of her own, so she was well versed in the intricacies of sisterly quarrels. "You'll love each other in the end," she'd say, as if sibling rivalry was merely a passing phase. My father was so engrossed in his work that he barely noticed the friction brewing between Amelia and me. Whenever we fought, he'd sigh, pat one of us on the back, and retreat to his office. Amelia's competitiveness grew more pronounced when we reached high school. She prided herself on her academic achievements, joining as many clubs as she could handle, showing off ribbons and trophies at every opportunity. While I worked diligently as well, I often found joy in smaller victories, a poem that won a local writing contest, or a role in the school spring play. Amelia belittled these accomplishments. "They don't really count," she would say, rolling her eyes. "You're just doing it for the attention. It's not like it's a real competition." I tried not to let her words get under my skin, but they did. Each subtle jab, each disparaging remark, chipped away at the love I'd once thought was unbreakable. Yet I clung to the memories of our childhood closeness. That was the reason I never confronted her outright. I kept hoping she'd revert to the sweet, supportive sister she used to be. When I turned 16, everything changed in a single night. It was my birthday, and my parents had arranged a modest party, close friends, a homemade cake, and a playlist of our favorite music. In the middle of the celebration, Amelia suddenly fled to her bedroom in tears. Mortified, I rushed after her, thinking she might be ill. Instead, I found her sobbing incoherently about feeling overshadowed and unappreciated. She accused me of always hogging the spotlight. "Everybody thinks you're so nice, so talented," she spat. "I'm tired of being in your shadow." Her words stung like cold, sharp needles. I tried to console her, but she pushed me away. The irony was painful. She'd always been the overachiever, the one collecting academic accolades, the one who seemed perpetually ahead. In my eyes, Amelia was brilliant. I admired her intelligence, her grit, and her drive. But clearly, she saw things differently, as if she lived in a distorted mirror where my successes overshadowed hers. Our conversation ended in shouting, and after that, the rift between us grew. Over time, it became a silent war. I shrank back from social gatherings to avoid stepping on her toes. I congratulated her on every award, tried to boost her confidence. Nothing worked. If anything, my attempts to stay in her good graces only deepened her resentment. She seemed determined to perceive me as the enemy. Eventually, we both graduated high school and embarked on different paths. Amelia's academic merits earned her a scholarship at a prestigious university on the other side of the country. I pursued a creative writing degree at a local college, hoping to hone the talent that had once made me glow with timid pride. We rarely spoke during those years, but whenever we did, the conversation felt forced and brittle. as if we were both tiptoeing around an unspoken bitterness. Through it all, I remained hopeful that we could mend our fractured relationship. She was my sister, after all, the one who had once held my hand in the darkness, who had confided her childhood dreams to me. Even as I sensed her emotional distance, I held on to the notion that time, distance, and maturity might somehow bring us back together. After all, families fight, but they also heal at least. That's what I kept telling myself. Little did I know how wrong I was. Our family dynamic was not on a simple path of reconciliation. Rather, we were barreling toward a collision that would shake the foundations of trust I had in her, in us. Years down the line, when I stood on the brink of matrimony, I would finally realize just how deep her envy ran and how far she was willing to go to soothe the ache of her own insecurities. College was an enlightening and lonely time. I found solace in my writing, pouring my tangled emotions into short stories that captured the complexities of love, betrayal, and family. Away from Amelia's shadow, I rediscovered my voice and made a small circle of friends who appreciated my creativity. But even then, a part of me felt unmoored, an intangible emptiness where my sister's friendship should have been. Amelia and I texted sporadically, mostly on birthdays or major holidays. Our conversations were polite, distant, and lacked the warmth we once shared. Occasionally, she would fire a subtle barb my way. When I posted online about winning a small writing prize, she commented with a curt, "Congrats, I guess." In turn, I tried to be gracious whenever she shared her triumphs: an internship at a high-profile law firm, a fancy research project, an award for her academic excellence. I told myself that supporting her unconditionally was the right thing to do, that it might mend our strained relationship. But deep down, I sensed her contempt for me growing more pronounced. Time passed, and our parents floated between pride and frustration. They were proud of our accomplishments, but frustrated by the persistent wedge between us. Their attempts to bring us together during family gatherings only reinforced our differences. Amelia would arrive in tailored outfits, sporting an aloof grin. She'd boast about her hectic schedule: exams, volunteer programs, job interviews. Meanwhile, I sat quietly, stirring my coffee and measuring my words, fearful that anything I said might trigger her scorn. The tension was palpable, humming just under the surface of every forced smile. Then life took me on a path I never anticipated. In my junior year, I met David in a creative writing workshop. He was tall, charming, and had a laugh that could fill an entire room. What started as a friendship, forged over late-night editing sessions and shared coffee runs, blossomed into a romance that felt like a salve for my wounded heart. We were drawn to each other's dreams. I confided in him about my complicated relationship with Amelia, and he opened up about his own struggles with an unsupportive father. David was also the first person to read my stories and offer genuine, constructive feedback. It was as if he believed in my talent, even more than I did. His support filled me with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. Slowly, the wound from Amelia's hostility began to heal, or at least scab over under David's steady affection. By the time I graduated, David and I were inseparable. We decided to move in together to a modest apartment near downtown, a cozy space with creaky floorboards and a view of the city skyline. I found a job as a copywriter for a local marketing firm, while he worked on launching a freelance web design business. Life was busy, but in the rare quiet moments, I contemplated the future: marriage, a family, maybe even writing a novel that would see the light of day. When David proposed to me on a crisp autumn evening, under the golden glow of fairy lights he had strung across our tiny balcony, I felt the world tilt in the most beautiful way. Tears of happiness streamed down my face, and he slid a simple yet elegant ring onto my finger. We kissed under that shimmering canopy of lights, and in that moment it felt like everything was perfect. Everything except the lingering dread of how Amelia would react. I shared the news of my engagement with my parents first. They were overjoyed, hugging me tight and talking about wedding arrangements before I could catch my breath. The conversation quickly shifted to Amelia. "Don't worry," my mother said, a nervous edge to her voice. "This is wonderful news. She'll be happy for you. She has to be." My mother's optimism was admirable but naive. Deep down, I feared Amelia would see my marriage as yet another facet of my life overshadowing hers. Regardless, I had to tell her. Summoning courage, I dialed her number. She answered on the third ring. Hey, sis. What's up? Her voice was oddly soft, as if she already knew something big was happening. I cleared my throat. I'm engaged, Amelia, David proposed. Silence. For a moment, I thought the call had dropped. Then she spoke, her tone teetering between forced cheer and brittle calm. Wow. Congratulations. When's the wedding? I breathed a sigh of relief. Maybe she would be supportive this time. We haven't set a date yet, but we're thinking maybe next spring. A small ceremony, just close friends and family. She paused, and I heard the faint clicking of her keyboard in the background. Was she working even now? Sounds nice. Let me know if you need any help. I could, offer suggestions, or plan something, if you want. Her offer stunned me. For a flicker of a moment, hope blossomed in my chest. This was the sister I remembered, the helpful, caring girl who used to hold my hand under quilts. Maybe we were finally turning a corner. Eager to seize the moment, I graciously accepted. I'd love that. I'd really love that, Amelia. Thus, our first conversation in months ended on a surprisingly bright note. Over the subsequent weeks, we texted about wedding details. She offered recommendations for caterers, even though I already had some in mind. She suggested themes and colour palettes. There were moments where her quick dismissals of my ideas felt patronizing, but I chose to ignore them. I wanted to believe that this was her way of trying to be involved, of bridging the gap between us. Then she brought up the wedding dress. I know someone who owns a boutique downtown, she said in a text message. They can custom make a dress for you. No expense spared. You should check it out. I hesitated. One of my close friends, Trisha, had promised to take me dress shopping, yet I felt compelled to keep Amelia engaged. Maybe if we tackled the dress together, it would be a bonding experience, a chance to heal old wounds. Against my better judgment, I agreed to go to the boutique she recommended. As I walked into that boutique, I couldn't help feeling a swirl of anticipation and anxiety. Amelia was already there, flipping through a rack of white dresses. She wore a polished grin, her tone bright as she greeted me. Let's find you the dress of your dreams, she said. For once, there was genuine excitement in her eyes. I tried to ignore the pang of suspicion in my gut, telling myself not to ruin the moment with old grudges. We spent the afternoon trying on gowns of all shapes and designs. She had a critical eye, pointing out each flaw or benefit in the dresses I modelled. At times, I found her commentary almost too critical. Was the neckline too low, the lace too cheap looking, the skirt too voluminous? Yet her eyes lit up when I finally emerged in a dress that felt perfect. It was a mermaid silhouette, intricately beaded, with delicate lace sleeves that gave it a timeless elegance. The way it hugged my figure made me feel both regal and demure. My heart fluttered. I could already imagine walking down the aisle, my father at my side, David waiting at the altar. It's beautiful, Amelia said softly, stepping closer. For a moment, her voice carried an emotion I couldn't quite place. This is it, right? This is the one. Tears brimmed in my eyes, and I nodded. The price tag was hefty, more than I had budgeted. But Amelia insisted that we could work something out with the boutique owner she knew. She even offered to cover part of the cost, calling it an early wedding gift. A jolt of joy and gratitude coursed through me, and I threw my arms around her. For that one fleeting instant, the distance between us vanished, and I believed we were finally moving forward, leaving old resentments behind. I had no idea that this hopeful moment was the calm before a storm of betrayal that would shake my entire world. The next few months of wedding preparations passed in a whirlwind of excitement, stress, and occasional flashes of sisterly bonding that gave me cautious optimism. Amelia began dropping by my apartment with magazines full of bridal hairstyles and floral arrangements. Although she would criticize some of my choices, rolling her eyes at the pastel color palette, I preferred she seemed more invested than I ever expected her to be. Meanwhile, David and I settled on a picturesque garden venue near a serene lake, a place that resonated with our shared love of nature and simple beauty. Perhaps the biggest hurdle was our budget. Both David and I wanted a modest affair, something intimate yet celebratory. He insisted on paying his share, despite having launched his freelance business only a few months prior. I worried about the costs piling up. To my surprise, Amelia offered to help, saying she had saved some extra money from her job at the law firm where she now worked. Though I initially resisted sisterly pride or fear of entangling finances, her insistence eventually wore me down. She seemed earnest about contributing, and I told myself it was her way of apologizing for past slights. Occasionally, I caught glimpses of her old self, the kind-hearted girl I grew up with, and it warmed my heart. One day, we visited the venue together, strolling hand in hand through rows of blooming roses while discussing seating arrangements. She even joked about how I'd once gotten stung by a bee in a rose garden when we were kids, turning a painful memory into a source of laughter. For a moment, all our old animosity seemed like a distant nightmare. Still, unease lingered on the fringes of my mind. Sometimes, Amelia's eyes would darken with an emotion I couldn't name. She'd abruptly change the subject when I mentioned David or our future plans. More than once, I found her flipping through pictures of dresses on her phone, her expression twisting between fascination and something akin to longing. I pushed these observations away, refusing to let fear poison our fragile truce. David, however, sensed my unease. He told me he was proud of me for trying to mend fences, but he also cautioned, "Don't ignore your instincts." His words lingered, a cautionary echo that kept me from fully letting my guard down. As the wedding drew closer, the dress became the focal point of all my excitement. After numerous fittings, the boutique had produced something even more exquisite than I could have dreamed. The mermaid silhouette had been refined to flatter every curve, and the intricate lace sleeves seemed spun from delicate moonlight. Each time I slipped it on, I felt like I was floating in a fairy tale realm. The boutique's owner assured me that every stitch was crafted with care, and Amelia, ever the stickler for perfection, gave her full approval. One evening, I scheduled a final fitting to make sure everything was perfect. Amelia said she'd meet me at the boutique after work. When I arrived, the shop was quiet except for a single attendant who greeted me with a smile. My heart raced in anticipation as I stepped into the changing room, slipping into the gown like it was a second skin. I stepped out, admiring my reflection under the soft glow of the spotlights. Even the attendant seemed awed, remarking how the dress seemed made for me. I waited for Amelia, but she didn't show. After half an hour, I called and texted no response. Disappointed, I changed out of the dress and arranged for a final pickup date, a week before the wedding. It wasn't like Amelia to miss something wedding-related, when she had been so enthusiastic. My mind buzzed with worries. Was she stuck in traffic, or had something happened at work? When I got home, David noticed my tense expression. He tried to cheer me up by cooking my favorite pasta dish, but I couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. My calls went unanswered all evening. Finally, past midnight, a text arrived. "Sorry, got swamped at work. Couldn't make it. We'll catch up tomorrow." No explanation or apology beyond that. My stomach churned with a vague apprehension, but I tried to push it aside. Time trudged forward, and my wedding week arrived in a flurry. My parents flew in from their vacation home, fussing over flower arrangements and the guest list. David's mother arrived from out of state, brimming with excitement and hugging me like she'd known me her entire life. Friends began trickling into town, and I found myself bouncing between final meetings with the caterer and the venue organizer. In the midst of the chaos, Amelia's contributions became less frequent. She was always busy. She stopped dropping by unannounced. Whenever I tried to call, our conversations were rushed, as though she had more important things to do. 3 days before the wedding, I received a short text from her. "I have a surprise for you on your big day. Don't worry, you'll love it." Something about her choice of words unsettled me. A surprise? She had never mentioned planning any additional surprises. I chalked it up to wedding jitters and reminded myself that Amelia, despite her faults, was still my sister. Maybe she was finally going out of her way to make up for lost time. The night before my wedding, I stayed at a hotel close to the venue with my bridesmaids. We laughed over silly memories, sipped sparkling cider, and tried to calm my frazzled nerves. My wedding gown was safely stored in the hotel's suite closet, delivered earlier that day from the boutique. Before going to bed, I glanced at it one last time, feeling a swell of gratitude that despite everything, I'd soon be marrying a man who cherished me for who I was. I awoke early on the morning of my wedding, nerves thrumming in my veins. My bridesmaids and I gathered in the suite, where a makeup artist and hairstylist began their careful work. Outside, sunshine streamed through the window, illuminating the bouquet of lilacs I'd chosen for my wedding flowers, just the gentle, pastel colour that Amelia had once deemed too soft. I ignored the memory of her critique. Today was about joy. My mother was the first to notice something amiss with the dress. She was helping me into it, gently pulling the zipper up, when she paused. "Sweetheart, the fabric. It feels different." Confusion pricked my heart. I glanced down, expecting to see the familiar lace. Instead, the lace looked heavier, almost plasticky. My breath caught in my throat. "What do you mean, different?" I asked, my voice tight with panic. Hands shaking, I examined the bodice. The intricate beading I remembered was gone, replaced with tacky sequins. The once delicate lace sleeves now felt rough and poorly stitched. Dread coiled in my stomach. This wasn't my gown. It was a cheap imitation, an ugly, substandard knockoff of the masterpiece I'd painstakingly chosen. My bridesmaids scrambled to check the garment bag, the tags, everything. The boutique's label was missing, replaced by a brand name I didn't recognize. Horror and disbelief washed over me. How had this happened? The shop had delivered my dress themselves. There must have been some mistake, but a frantic call to the boutique left me cold. "We delivered the correct gown, ma'am," the manager insisted. I personally inspected it before it was placed in the bag. Her voice carried genuine shock. "Are you sure someone didn't switch it after delivery?" As tears threatened to spill, I tried to think logically. Who would have reason to tamper with my dress? The question rattled in my mind until an answer, dark and insidious, took shape. Amelia. She had grown distant, had the means to pull such a stunt, and had even mentioned a surprise. My heart clenched, unable to accept the possibility that my own sister would sabotage the most important day of my life. My mother hovered by my side, wringing her hands. "Could it be an error? The shop might be lying to cover themselves," she offered, but her gaze betrayed her doubt. Though every nerve in my body screamed in outrage, I tried to keep calm. My wedding was in a few hours. Guests were arriving. Panic was not an option. "Let's call Amelia," I said, swallowing the lump in my throat. She might know something. Maybe it was meant to be a prank or something else. We tried her phone, no answer. My mother, father, bridesmaids. Even David tried texting and calling. No response. Time ticked by mercilessly, and I felt my dream wedding unraveling. I thought of David, waiting at the venue, trusting that I'd be there, radiant in the gown that I'd chosen so carefully. My cheeks burned with shame and fury. In desperation, my father offered to drive to Amelia's apartment. "I'll find her," he promised, determination shining in his eyes. Meanwhile, the rest of us brainstormed possible solutions. Find a backup dress at a local shop, wear a bridesmaid's dress, or see if the boutique could deliver a spare gown. But every idea fell flat. Local shops were closed or didn't carry anything as formal as a wedding gown. The boutique had nothing suitable in my size at such short notice. I stared at the cheap knockoff draped over the dressing dummy, tears burning my eyes. Then a quiet fury took root in my heart. This was no random accident. Amelia had arranged for the real dress to vanish, leaving me with this atrocity. Why? Was it jealousy, spite, or some twisted need to sabotage my happiness? My hands clenched into fists. I couldn't let her win. I wouldn't let Amelia's bitterness ruin one of the most important days of my life. My bridesmaids were already brainstorming ways to fix or salvage the dress, but I knew deep down that no amount of last-minute tailoring would transform this travesty into the gown I'd fallen in love with. For a moment, despair threatened to overwhelm me. Then David's voice echoed in my mind. "Don't ignore your instincts." I remembered how supportive he'd been, how we'd conquered every obstacle so far. A sudden resolve coursed through me. If Amelia wanted to see me crumble, I would do the opposite. I would walk down that aisle, cheap knockoff or no, and marry the man I loved. And once I was standing at the altar, I would expose the truth of Amelia's betrayal, ensuring that she bore the weight of her actions. I lifted my chin, meeting the stunned gazes of my bridesmaids. "Help me get into it," I ordered, gesturing at the fake gown. Their eyes widened in disbelief, but they nodded. My mother bit her lip, tears glistening in her eyes. "Are you sure, sweetheart? We can try something else," I exhaled shakily. "I'm sure. I'm not letting her ruin this day for me." Though my heart pounded with anger and sorrow, A spark of determination blazed in my chest. Amelia had forced my hand, but she had underestimated me. By the day's end, everyone would know the extent of her cruelty, and I would find a way to turn her treachery into a moment of triumph. As my bridesmaids helped me into the knockoff dress, I closed my eyes, inhaling slowly. This gown didn't define my marriage. Love defined it. Truth defined it. In that moment, I vowed that Amelia would never hold power over me again. If she wanted war, she would get it, and I intended to emerge victorious. My father returned empty-handed. He'd knocked on Amelia's door repeatedly, but no one answered. Her car wasn't in the driveway, and her neighbours hadn't seen her since the previous evening. With no time left to search for her, and the ceremony looming, I steeled myself for the unthinkable. I would wear the knockoff dress, walk down the aisle, and marry David. If Amelia chose to slink out of sight, that was on her. Little did I know she was preparing to make her grand entrance at the exact moment she believed it would hurt me most. Accompanied by my bridesmaids, I made my way to the venue. Despite the turmoil raging inside me, the day was breathtaking, golden sunlight spilling over the manicured lawns, a gentle breeze rustling through the trees, and flowers arranged in pastel arches that framed the garden pathway. As guests took their seats, I stood hidden behind a tall hedge, awaiting my cue. My heart pounded with a strange mix of excitement and fury. The knockoff dress clung awkwardly to my body. The cheap fabric scratched my skin, making me feel self-conscious. Yet a fierce determination underpinned my every step. I would not give Amelia the satisfaction of cowering. My bouquet trembled in my hands as I thought of David. He was my anchor. If he could look at me with the same love and devotion despite this fiasco, then perhaps it meant something deeper. Our bond was unshakable by even the worst betrayals. At the first notes of the wedding march, I stepped forward, my father at my side. Shock murmured through the crowd. As they noticed the dress, everyone knew how meticulously I'd planned to have a custom creation. Yet David's reaction was all that mattered. His eyes widened slightly, not with judgment but with concern. In that moment, his expression said, "I love you, no matter what." I nearly lost my composure, tears threatening to spill down my cheeks. My father squeezed my hand in silent support. Together, we walked the short distance to where David stood, waiting beneath a floral arbor. The guests turned, craning their necks, perhaps expecting a dramatic reveal of the real gown. Instead, they witnessed my raw resolve as I arrived in a blatant forgery. When I reached David, I saw his eyes flicker to the subpar lace and tacky sequins. He frowned slightly, confusion evident, but he caught my gaze. Searching for answers, he mouthed, "Are you okay?" I nodded, forcing a reassuring smile. There, in his eyes, I found the reassurance I needed. Dress or not, we were about to vow our lives to each other. The officiant began the ceremony. Soft rustles echoed across the garden as our friends and family leaned in, absorbing every word. I struggled to focus, fighting the maelstrom of emotions swirling inside. Betrayal, hurt, anger, but also determination, love, and the need for justice. David's hand clasped mine, his thumb stroking my knuckles gently. His unwavering presence reminded me why I was here, to start a new chapter, free from the shackles of the past. Just as the officiant asked if there was anyone who objected to our union, a sudden commotion rippled at the back of the crowd. Heads swiveled, and my heart lurched. Amelia appeared, striding down the aisle with a smug, triumphant air. She was dressed in a sleek emerald gown that hugged her figure. On her arm was a garment bag, a bag that looked disturbingly similar to the one that should have contained my real wedding dress. A hush fell over the gathering. Shock etched into every face, including my mother's and father's. My pulse thundered. Was she truly going to interrupt my ceremony? The officiant glanced at me with uncertainty. David's grip on my hand tightened, as if he could sense the storm about to break. Amelia halted halfway down the aisle. With slow deliberation, she unzipped the garment bag to reveal my original, stunning mermaid gown. Gasps rippled through the guests. Some leaned forward, confusion and intrigue battling on their faces. My mother stifled a cry, and I saw my father's expression twist in anger. "Ladies and gentlemen," Amelia announced, her voice slicing through the stunned silence, "I apologize for this interruption, But my dear sister seems to have misplaced her actual wedding dress. She held up the exquisite gown, letting it shimmer in the sunlight. Fortunately, I found it before it was too late. Isn't it breathtaking? In that moment, all eyes swung to me in my sorry excuse for a dress. My cheeks burned as a wave of humiliation threatened to drown me. She was orchestrating a spectacle, trying to cast me as some hapless bride who, in her carelessness, had lost the most important garment of her life. My mind reeled at the audacity. This went beyond envy. This was a calculated attempt to undermine my dignity in front of everyone I loved. My father, face taut with fury, stepped forward. "Amelia, this isn't the time or place. What do you think you're doing?" Ignoring him, Amelia fixed her gaze on me. A malicious spark danced in her eyes. "You must have been so distraught to find your dress missing," she cooed, feigning concern. "But don't worry, sis. I saved the day." She beckoned to one of the bewildered ushers, as if expecting them to race over and help me change right then and there. A tremor started at my core and moved outward. I refused to be cowed. Taking a slow, steady breath, I addressed the crowd in a clear voice. "What an incredible surprise, Amelia! I appreciate you," holding on to my gown. Truly, her smirk faltered. She hadn't expected me to maintain my composure. "I can't imagine how upset you must have been when you realized you didn't have the correct dress," she continued, her voice sweetened with false sympathy. "Maybe next time you'll be more careful about your belongings." At that, the final puzzle piece locked into place. She wanted me to grovel, to thank her publicly, and appear irresponsible. But I had no intention of playing her game. My mother moved as if to say something, but I gently signaled her to stay back. She was trembling with rage and confusion. But I needed to handle this myself. "Actually, Amelia," I said, projecting my voice so every guest could hear, "I've been careful. I stored my gown securely at the hotel. The real question is how you ended up with it." She froze, and for a fleeting second, the confidence in her eyes wavered. A ripple of uncertain whispers stirred the crowd. I glanced at David, who gave me a subtle nod, encouraging me to continue. The officiant shifted uncomfortably, but he remained silent, sensing this was beyond normal wedding formalities. I stepped forward, standing tall despite the scratchy fabric clinging to my skin. My gaze swept across the rows of guests' friends, family, colleagues. "Amelia has been helping with the wedding," I explained to them, keeping my tone calm and clear. She offered to handle certain details, including the final delivery of my dress. But this morning, I discovered that the dress in my garment bag was a cheap imitation. A cruel prank, perhaps. Low murmurs intensified. Some guests exchanged wide-eyed glances. Others fixed their stare on Amelia, whose expression teetered between defiance and panic. She attempted a scoff, but her voice caught in her throat. "How dare you? How did you get this dress, Amelia?" I pressed, cutting her off. "Because if you truly found it, you would have contacted us immediately. Instead, you waited until the ceremony, until the moment we asked for objections to appear. Why is that?" She clenched her jaw, struggling to maintain her facade. "I was only trying to return it in time." I looked directly at my parents, letting my voice rise with righteous anger. "I trusted her. We all did. She sabotaged my wedding dress, hoping to humiliate me, and now she's trying to make herself look like the savior." My eyes misted with tears, not of sorrow, but of a deep-seated betrayal that threatened to overwhelm me. Amelia's composure began to crack. Some of the guests, my college friends, cousins, and David's relatives, stared at her with undisguised contempt. I could sense the tide turning. She lashed out, her voice trembling with rage. "You always think you're so perfect, so innocent. This was a chance to show everyone you're not, that you're careless, incompetent," my father advanced, voice quivering with fury. "Enough, Amelia." He looked at her as though he barely recognized his own daughter. "Why would you do this to your sister?" Her eyes blazed. "Because she's always the favorite. The sweet one, the talented one, the bride who gets everything she wants." She pointed an accusing finger at me, her voice rising in desperation. "I've worked my entire life, pushing myself to be better, but she's the one everyone loves for just being herself. I'm sick of it!" A shocked hush fell over the garden. Amelia's confession hung heavy in the air. My father took a trembling step back, My mother buried her face in her hands. A swirl of conflicting emotions battered me: anger, pity, heartbreak. In that moment, I saw clearly that Amelia was lost in a labyrinth of envy and bitterness. She couldn't escape. David squeezed my hand. I steadied myself, heart hammering, and addressed Amelia in a measured tone. I'm sorry you feel that way, but turning my wedding into a spectacle of revenge won't fix what's broken inside you. It only hurts you more. Tears pooled in her eyes, though her anger remained. She hurled one last barb. Don't patronize me. You think you're so wise, but you're just as broken. With that, she flung the gown to the ground, letting the delicate lace crumple against the grass. A wave of gasps rippled through the crowd. Amelia spun on her heel and stormed off, leaving the garment sprawled in the aisle like a fallen angel's wings. For a moment, no one moved. The officiant looked at me, uncertain whether to proceed. My mother hesitantly approached the discarded gown, tears streaming down her face. I felt David's arm encircle my waist, offering silent comfort. All around us, guests were hushed, unsure how to react to the raw family drama that had just played out before them. Summoning courage, I gently disengaged from David and walked to my mother's side. We both stooped to lift the gown, and I felt its delicate fabric slip through my fingers like a whisper of a dream. The difference in quality was jarring compared to the fake dress that clung to me now. I looked back at David, who waited patiently under the arbor, his eyes full of unwavering love. The officiant stepped forward tentatively, as if to ask whether we should continue. I caught David's gaze, and a wave of warmth flooded me. Yes, this was still our day, our commitment. I refused to let Amelia's bitterness overshadow our joy. Gathering a deep breath, I turned to the guests. I'm sorry you all had to witness that, I said, my voice steady despite my trembling hands. Family isn't always easy, but this wedding is about love, forgiveness, and new beginnings. I still want to marry the man I love today. My eyes flickered to David, and he nodded, the corners of his mouth lifting in a reassuring smile. We can wait, he said softly. You can change into your real gown if you want. Some of our friends murmured in agreement. They were willing to give me time, to let me salvage the perfect moment. But I shook my head, surprising even myself. There was a symbolism to wearing the knockoff dress, an emblem of Amelia's attempt to ruin me. Yet, here I stood, unbroken, forging ahead. I wanted to transform this cursed garment into a testament of resilience, a reminder that I wouldn't let bitterness or sabotage destroy my happiness. So, right then and there, in front of all our guests and the floral arbor, I slipped back into place beside David. My mother, tears of pride now mixing with her sorrow, retreated to the front row to stand with my father. The officiant cleared his throat and continued where he left off, the ceremony carrying on as if rising above the chaos. Time seemed to slow as David and I exchanged vows. While the cheap fabric chafed my skin, the sincerity in our words enveloped me in warmth. When we finally said I do, a wave of applause broke the tension that had weighed on the crowd. David leaned in, and our first kiss as husband and wife felt like a promise sealed in hope and defiance. As we broke apart, I glanced at the empty aisle, half expecting Amelia to be lurking. She was nowhere to be seen. Instead, I saw my true family and friends, beaming with support. In that moment, the knockoff dress became irrelevant. I was married to the man I loved, determined to forge a future built on trust and unity, not the wreckage of my sister's betrayal. Yet deep in my heart, I knew this wasn't over. Amelia's actions had fractured our family, leaving a trail of questions and wounds. It was impossible to ignore the darkness that had been exposed. I had survived her attempt at public humiliation, but how could we move forward from such a betrayal? Through the rest of the afternoon, David and I welcomed our guests, cut the cake, and shared our first dance. Laughter and well wishes echoed under the open sky. Still, a sliver of unease haunted me, like a stubborn shadow that wouldn't fade. While I savoured every moment of celebration with my husband, I also turned my thoughts toward the future, how to confront Amelia's actions, how to heal, or if necessary, protect myself from her entirely. But that was a battle for tomorrow. For now, I focused on the present joy, my hand clasped in David's, surrounded by friends and family who cheered our union. Amelia might have tried to tear me down, but she had inadvertently revealed her own anguish. Whether we could ever reconcile was uncertain. One thing was clear, though: my sister had underestimated my strength, and I wasn't about to let her sabotage me again. In the days that followed my tumultuous wedding, I felt torn between sorrow and a fierce sense of relief. My life had changed in an instant. I was now a wife, bound by love and promise to David, yet also reeling from the shock of my sister's very public betrayal. I tried to reach Amelia multiple times, but my calls inevitably went to voicemail. Text messages remained unanswered. She had become a spectre, unrepentant, invisible, and isolated from the family she had wronged. My parents were as stunned as I was. They alternated between apologizing on Amelia's behalf and reprimanding her in absentia, desperately trying to bridge the rift. "We never imagined she could do something so cruel," my mother said one evening, tearful and subdued. My father offered to hire a private investigator, worried Amelia might be in some kind of trouble, but I declined. I sensed that she was simply hiding from the chaos she had unleashed. I had neither the energy nor the desire to force her back into my life before she was ready to confront what she'd done. In the meantime, David and I settled into a quiet routine, trying to process the storm that had overshadowed our wedding day. We spent hours talking, sometimes late into the night, about forgiveness, loyalty, and the boundaries we needed to set. He confessed that while he hated seeing me hurt, he couldn't help feeling sorry for Amelia, whose jealousy had driven her to self-sabotage. I had to admit, I shared that sentiment, though anger still simmered beneath my sympathy. Curiously, a burst of local media coverage sprang up around our wedding drama, sensationalized and stripped of personal details, yet still recognizable. Headlines gossiped about the bride who wore a knockoff dress and the spurned sister who upstaged the ceremony. While these snippets never mentioned us by name, enough people in our community knew the real story that whispers spread. To my surprise, I found a small measure of empowerment in owning what had happened. Rather than hide in shame, I openly told co-workers and acquaintances. Yes, that was my wedding. No, it didn't go as planned, but we moved forward anyway. I learned something profound from this experience. I'd spent years letting Amelia's moods and slights define my own sense of worth. Her resentment shaped how I saw myself. I was always the girl who needed to stay out of her sister's way. Wearing that cheap knockoff dress, I realized I could stand tall despite being stripped of my ideal. My marriage was grounded in genuine love, and if anyone judged me by the sheen of my gown rather than the sincerity of my vows, that was their loss. A knockoff dress might tarnish appearances, but it couldn't touch real devotion. In the weeks following the wedding, my parents attempted a gentle outreach to Amelia. Their calls were returned only once, and only briefly. According to my mother, Amelia sounded cold but safe. She said she needed time to think. My mother tried to invite her to a family dinner. Amelia declined without providing reasons. It broke my mother's heart, but as painful as it was, I knew forcing a reunion could deepen the chasm between us. Meanwhile, David and I found small moments of peace in our new status as husband and wife. We spent lazy Sundays looking for yard sales to decorate our living room, or sharing cups of coffee while brainstorming how to grow his freelance business and my budding career in marketing. We revisited the venue where our ceremony had taken place, walking by the lake at sunset, hand in hand, reflecting on how adversity had fused our bond more tightly than any perfect wedding day ever could. About a month later, a mutual acquaintance informed me that Amelia had taken a leave of absence from her law firm. No one knew the specifics, whether she was seeking therapy, traveling, or merely avoiding prying eyes. I was torn between wanting to confront her and wanting to protect myself from further heartbreak. One evening, David and I talked for hours about whether I should track her down, demand an explanation, or beg for an apology. In the end, we agreed that it was Amelia's responsibility to face the consequences of what she'd done. I was done chasing her approval or her remorse. My parents began mending their own relationship with me, guilt-ridden that they had never seen Amelia's envy for what it was. My father took me aside on one visit and, with uncharacteristic vulnerability, said, "I always admired how close you two were as children. I never wanted to believe that bond could break. I should have acted sooner, but I kept pretending it would all blow over. His eyes shone with tears he refused to shed. I held his hand, assuring him I didn't blame him. Families are complicated, and sometimes all we can do is move forward with eyes wide open. Gradually, the public curiosity around my wedding's scandalous twist faded. People found new topics to gossip about, and the local tabloids latched onto fresher stories. With that breath of social relief, I poured my energy into creating a home that felt truly ours, mine and David's. I framed some candid shots from our wedding reception, laughter at the cake cutting, our awkward first dance in my stiff, subpar gown, my parents attempting to look cheerful in spite of everything. I hung them on the hallway wall to remind myself that even amid betrayal, there had been joy, genuine support, and unbreakable love. 3 months into our marriage, I received a text from Amelia. It was brief and devoid of apology, congratulating me on the wedding pictures circulating online. Apparently, she had stumbled across one of the local media stories. "Looks like you survived after all," she wrote, followed by a curt "take care." I stared at the message for a long while, emotions swirling. Part of me wanted to hurl the phone across the room, outraged at her flippancy. Another part felt a pang of sorrow, remembering the sister I used to have. Perhaps this was Amelia's version of reaching out, an olive branch weighed down by too much history to float. I decided to answer her. "Yes, I did survive. Life is good with David. I hope you're doing well." I left it at that, polite, even, but not welcoming further hostility. She never responded. I wasn't surprised, and strangely, I felt okay with it. For so long, my life had revolved around wanting her acceptance. Now, for the first time, I felt like I could breathe without waiting for her approval or dreading her criticism. On our first anniversary, David surprised me with a vow renewal in our living room. Just the two of us and our closest friends watching through a laptop screen. He placed a tiny paper ring on my finger, a playful echo of the day's trials, and we promised once more to stand by each other, no matter what storms might come. In that quiet, intimate moment, I felt a healing warmth fill me. Amelia's betrayal had scarred me, but it hadn't defeated me. I had chosen love, chosen to stand tall, and chosen to let the shattered pieces of the past remain where they belonged behind me. That evening, after our small ceremony concluded and our guests logged off, David and I curled up on the sofa, reminiscing about the wedding. We laughed about how bizarre it was that a cheap knockoff dress had become so central to our story. But we also recognized that, in an odd way, Amelia's sabotage had gifted us a deeper lesson. Real love doesn't hinge on superficial perfection. My mother's tears, my father's concern, our friends' unwavering support, and David's steadfast gaze at the altar, all of it proved that no matter what illusions someone tries to tear away, the core of who we are and how we love remains. Sometimes, in my quieter moments, I still wondered if Amelia would ever confront her jealousy and heal. I pictured her, possibly alone in her apartment, flipping through social media posts and feeling that cold, resentful pang whenever she saw me smiling. Would she always see me as the undeserving sister who overshadowed her? Or would she one day open her eyes to the possibility that love and happiness are not finite? Resources that my joy didn't steal anything from her? Whether that day came or not was, ultimately, her choice. My responsibility was to live authentically and embrace a future unshackled by her bitterness. Over time, a peaceful acceptance filled my heart. Some wounds never fully vanish, but they do become part of our narrative, reminders of where we've been and how far we've come. If Amelia ever returns with remorse or a genuine desire to reconcile, I'll listen. If she never does, I'll still thrive. My life with David is built on foundations Amelia can't shake: respect, kindness, and an unbreakable willingness to weather life's battles side by side. Looking back, that humiliating switch of gowns on the morning of my wedding taught me a lesson I might otherwise have missed. When faced with betrayal, we can crumble or we can rise. I chose to rise. And because of that choice, my marriage isn't defined by crisis, but by our shared strength in the face of it. Amelia may have set out to hurt me, but in the end, she only cemented my resolve. My once fractured sense of self grew stronger, knowing that no one, no matter how close, could truly sabotage my happiness if I refused to let them. And so I moved forward, step by step, day by day, neither erasing Amelia from my life, nor allowing her to overshadow it. In that acceptance, I found the steady, certain peace that every newlywed deserves. The cheap lace and sequins of that knockoff dress had long been packed away, but its memory lingered less as a scar and more as a testament to the power of love, self-worth, and resilience. Thank you for joining me on this emotional journey of betrayal, resilience, and ultimately, love. If you found inspiration in my story, if it reminded you of your own strength, or showed you that even the darkest familial conflicts can spark personal growth, please consider supporting this channel. Give this video a like, share it with anyone who might need a reminder that hope and resolve can triumph over envy, and subscribe so you won't miss future stories of courage and transformation. Your engagement means the world, and it helps our channel reach more people who could benefit from these heartfelt narratives. After all, every story carries a lesson, and by sharing them, we create a community of empathy and empowerment. Stay strong, stay true to your heart, and remember, even when life's trials seem insurmountable, your spirit can rise above, shining brighter than any storm that threatens to overshadow it.